Apologize for the delay. I was over testifying in the House of Delegates. I ran into Delegate Stein over there. Okay, we're going to start with Delegate Muniz on House Bill 1141. And you get the time you need to present your bill, and it's all yours. Again, House Bill 1141.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for having me today. This is my first time that I've got to cross the street to testify, so thank you so much. I'm very proud today to introduce House Bill 1141. So for the record, my name is Delegate Rachel Munoz, and I am here with a bill I'm very proud of. It has a huge amount of bipartisan support, both in the sponsorship as well as in the committee across the street. Whether you care or not, they did vote it out of committee unanimously, and it was voted out of the floor unanimously. And we did do some amendments over there to kind of expand it and make it a little bit more generalized. But it basically is just to prohibit any sort of technology on state devices and Wi-Fi and things like that that could potentially lead to national state security risks. And so originally it was about TikTok, which at the beginning of session that was less cool. And now the federal government, the intelligence agencies, the president, everyone is, brought their concerns out. There's bipartisan work being done at the federal level to really protect our devices and our technology. And for me, it was sort of a late file because I thought about, my device that we all have all this testimony from the public on, and, all this sensitive information. And I would hate for, anything to happen to that information. And in the House, I was lucky enough to have a 20-year cybersecurity expert with me testifying, and he is a good friend and took the time to read all 50 pages of TikTok's user agreement that I will admit I have not read, and most human beings have not read. But he was able to explain it in detail and explain things like, when you do keystrokes, TikTok has the ability to capture that. So if you're putting in your data for your mobile banking, or if you're typing your social security number or anything like that, they have the ability to pull that information. You agree to that. And so our biggest concern right now with international relations is the fact that the company ByteDance that owns TikTok is required by law to produce any user data that they possibly have to the Chinese government. And so that's sort of the bill in a nutshell. I so appreciate you allowing me to share it with you today, and I am happy to answer any questions I can.
Okay, thank you. Any quick questions? We've got Senator Carrozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to clarify that this prohibition is for any technology owned by state government?
Correct. Yes.
Okay,
so it's not super broad. It's not everyone. I mean, back at the beginning before session, I guess early January after we had started, is when we really started to hear more and more concerns about this. And so I figured our devices, our state government devices that have so much sensitive information, I think that's worth protecting. And I tried to just produce a bill that would be very clean, very simple, and non-controversial. So yes.
Okay, any additional questions for the sponsor?
Yeah.
Yes, Vice Chair Kagan.
Sorry, trying to eat lunch. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, Delegate Munoz. Thank you for the bill. Can you talk us through how complicated this will be? If this were a state work phone, which it isn't, but how hard would it be and what would enforcement look like?
So as far as I'm aware, there's certain things that we're sort of not supposed to be doing on our state devices for other reasons, right? And I believe we're mostly monitored. I'm under the impression everything that we sort of type and Google and websites we're on is being seen. And so I don't anticipate any sort of aggressive penalty induced, compliance with this. But I think, if people are, I don't even want to, there's only one category of things I know on our devices we're very, very not supposed to be on, and I don't want to really talk about it, but like, if we're on that, I'm sure someone will come and say, you need to stop doing that. And so I'm imagining it would be something like that.
Okay.
So in keeping with that answer, I'm wondering about the October 1 effective date. Because sometimes Maryland likes to be a leader and likes to be at the forefront, especially with a new administration and a lot of people getting new devices. It seems like this might be a tipping point to kind of take action sooner than that. And I don't know if that's something you talked about at all in the House.
So I think you're absolutely right. I actually have been starting to see emergency bills on the floor. It's only my second session and I thought, oh, well, that's what I should have done if only I had known how. So I do think that this is becoming more and more time sensitive. And that's what I said in the House, because the day before my testimony there, the federal government had, a bipartisan group come out and I'm like, I put this in months ago. But we're realizing it's more and more urgent. And so I think you're absolutely right. I think it's something we should probably implement a lot sooner. And I think uninstalling something like that would take a few minutes for most of us. So.
Okay, any additional questions for the sponsor? Yes, Senator Augustine.
Thank you, Chair Feldman. Thank you, Delegate Munoz. There is testimony, were you aware of the request from the University System of Maryland for them to be exempted out because they said it would be very expensive and very difficult for them? Were you aware of that?
So I wasn't until today. In the House. We had no opposition. And I did just get their favorable with amendment. And I sent a message to Mr. Hogan, and I'm absolutely happy to work with them because I understand those types of constraints. And I had in my bill originally provisions dealing with like research, law enforcement activity, things like that. And so I'd be happy to work with them on that.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 1141. Okay, before we go to Delegates Love and Stein, we do have two bills that have one witness, just the sponsor. Can we just, if you don't mind, I'd love to just knock them out and then we'll go to you two. So I see Delegate Ambry and Senator Rosapip here. Delegate Ambry, why don't you come up on House Bill 624? You're the only witness, and then we'll take Senator Rosapip and then we'll move to Delegates Love and Stein.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair. Honored to be amongst you all today. For the record, Delegate Marlon Ampry here in support of House Bill 624, notification requirements for water suppliers. So in September of 2022, there was an E. coli outbreak in Baltimore City that primarily affected my district, West Baltimore, and parts of Baltimore County. While the E. coli contamination was discovered on a Friday, September 2nd, the public was not notified until Monday, September 5th. As a result, residents living in the affected area were drinking and bathing in potentially contaminated water for 3 days. I think what occurred showed that we have somewhat of a flaw in our water notification system. So what House Bill 624 does is being introduced for the purpose of improving the public notification requirements of potential water contamination by requiring water suppliers to notify the Department of Environment and Residents affected through at least one means of notification upon first signs of water contamination, and provide non-collegiate educational institutions, public schools, family child care homes, and child care centers with written notice. We also have an amendment that we're adding where we also would include hospitals and the groups that would receive this written notice. Provide notice through at least 3 means of communication if the water supplier serves more than 3,300 customers. Notify the Department of the Environment and the Maryland Department of Emergency Management and immediately begin preparations to issue a water boil advisory if there is a positive E. coli test in the water system. Currently, we wait longer before we start preparing for the water boil advisory. On the initial test, this bill will require that the water boil advisory be prepared to go out once we have confirmation on the second test. Directly deliver notice to each person served in the system within 30 days of learning of a violation that has potential for long-term health effects. Provide notice to each person served by the water system within 1 year of learning of all other violations. And lastly, the bill requires that each community water system and non-community water system test the water for MTBE and notify the persons regularly served by the water system and certain institutions if the levels exceed the state advisory level. Again, we've been working with MDE on this bill. I'm thankful that it passed unanimously, and ENT, it passed unanimously in the House with full bipartisan support. There also are additional amendments that MDE has provided. There are technical changes to ensure that the notification systems that we are going to enforce here are in compliance with current federal law. And I already mentioned that we are also going to have hospitals included with another amendment, and then also another amendment that will Also make sure that the science around the testing component complies with how we distribute notice, when to trigger the notice. This bill is really important as far as ensuring that when we have disasters that happen with our water, that residents, our constituents are getting notice as soon as possible. It's important that we get that out as soon as possible. I know there's an unfavorable letter that that came in that said, you know, this might add too much, but I think we can never do too much when it comes to ensuring that our residents and constituents have the notice that they need in order to protect their bodies and their families from possibly contaminated water. Additionally, I think this bill should remain focused on just notification to residents and our constituents. This bill is not about where possible contamination came from. This bill is not about how to locate the contamination. This bill is strictly about, if there is contamination, how can we get notification to residents as soon as possible? With that said, I urge a favorable report on House Bill 624, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
Okay, thank you. Senator Augustine.
Thank you, Chair Feldman. So I always just want to give folks an opportunity to respond to the, request for amendments. Are you aware of the request for amendments from the Department of the Environment?
Which amendments? Which amendments are those?
Well, they asked for one amendment was the rule. So you're not.
Well, there's several amendments I've been talking to them with, so I'm trying to make sure this isn't an additional amendment that I'm not aware of. We've gone back and forth on about 3 or 4 amendments. So I just want to make sure this isn't one of those 3 or 4.
Okay.
So I just want to know which one this is.
No problem. This was what they sent over for, to the committee. And they asked that there was be the 3,300 grader only be subject to the at least 3 means of notification. Did you?
Right. Yeah. So I'm in agreement with those. Yeah. Those amendments.
That's going to be adopted.
Yeah.
Or rather, you would ask that we adopt
yes.
that.
Yeah. And some of the amendments we've agreed to we thought they'd be over by now, but they're on their way over. So MD and we have been in close communication, and I'm in full support of their suggestions, and we had a long conversation about it yesterday.
Okay, very good. I just wanted to make sure that you had a chance to let us know that you would be good with what the things that they.
Yeah, and that amendment was just to make sure that we were in compliance with the federal laws on water notification. As currently drafted, it's a possibility that a water system could be that they could comply with our laws, but by complying with only our laws, they could possibly be in federal violation. So we want to make sure that they're not in that situation. Okay. So that's what the amendment does.
All right, delegates. So there were some others too, which we won't go through right now, but you can make sure you look at this, and we'll make sure that we incorporate them into the bill. Is that good?
Yep, we're good. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions for the sponsor? Okay, that concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 624, and let's get Senator Rosapip up here quick for
thank you so much.
Sponsor only bill, Senate Bill 923, and then we'll go back to Delegates Love and Stein. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify.
Never mind. Those are cross 903. Okay, I didn't realize these are Delegate Stein's bill and your bill. Okay, well then why don't you go back? You guys were you planning to present the bills together, or what?
I have a suggestion, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
That Delegate Stein present, and then I'll say amen.
Okay, I like that idea. So let's do that. You can go back and sit next to Delegate Stein. No, here, I'd rather.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Let's go to Delegate Love, because she was waiting here first, and then you guys can be next up. So let's go to Delegate Love, which is House Bill 109, and then the Rosa Pep Stein team will come up after that. So
thank you, Mr. Chair. May I bring up my panel?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And so I've got signed up here. And I don't know who you've designated as your panelists, but I've got Chaz Miller, Dominic Butchko, Jeremy Engel, Pam Casemeyer, John Griffin. Those are all.
I had asked Chaz and Dom, but the more the merrier. I'm happy
Okay,
to have
well,
everybody up here.
Okay, so how many seats we got? Chaz Miller. Who'd you ask first?
Chaz and Dom.
Okay, so Chaz and Dom, why don't you come up? And since the other folks are signed up straight favorable, Pam, if you want to have a seat, and then we'll pick up Mr. Griffin after that. But why don't you start off, Delegate Love, again on House Bill 109.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair. Colleagues, it's nice to see you all again today, to be back here. Delegate Sarah Love here to present to you HB 109, which is a task force on the Maryland Recycling Act. As you all know, the Maryland Recycling Act is what guides our recycling. It sets mandatory recycling rates and reporting guidelines for our local jurisdiction. This was a cutting edge bill when it was enacted back in 1988. It was sponsored by then Delegate Brian Frosch, in whose shoes I follow as a delegate from District 16. And it was ahead of its time back then. And over the years, we as a body have added to the Maryland Recycling Act, but we've never actually taken a step back and said, are we looking at the right things? Are we counting the right things? Are we collecting the right things? And as you'll hear from the folks at this table, recycling has changed tremendously in the years since 1988. So what this bill does is it sets up a task force, and this task force is to look at updating the Maryland Recycling Act. It's to look at the feasibility of implementing regional systems, cost sharing opportunities, developing networks, and advancing principles of zero waste. So that's what the bill does. And with that, I respectfully request a favorable report.
Okay, let's go through the panel and then we'll take questions. Who would like to go next?
You go ahead, I'll go ahead.
Okay, put the mic, get close.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Chaz Miller. I chair the Maryland Recycling Network's Legislative Task Force. Our members are public sector recycling managers, private sector recyclers, and advocates. We support HB 109 and we thank Delegate Love for introducing this bill. The Maryland Recycling Act was enacted in 1988. Maryland was one of the first states to enact a statewide recycling law after the 1987 voyage of the garbage barge. Recycling was so different back then. In 1988, the first single stream recycling program in the United States started in Seattle. Single stream now dominates curbside recycling. In 1988, newspaper was the only paper product collected at the curbside. Now we collect boxes and other paper packages. In 1988, recycling of plastic soft drink bottles and milk jugs was in its infancy. Now we collect a wide variety of plastic products and packages. In 1988, materials recycling facilities were primitive compared to today's facilities with robots and artificial intelligence and optical scanners. Totally different world. In 1988, we had little understanding of recycling's ability to lower greenhouse gas emissions. Recycling has changed dramatically, but the MRA hasn't. It's time to update the MRA to embody the best environmental objectives and to improve the ability of Maryland's local governments to reflect the new realities of recycling. We have learned so much over the last 35 years. Let's profit from this learning. And I thank you and urge the passage of this bill.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, why
so,
don't you go next? And by the way, we don't have our clock on, but each of you has 2 minutes.
our fellow is going to deliver Mako's testimony today.
Absolutely, that's fine.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair. My name is Jeremy Engel, and I'm here testifying on behalf of Mako in support of this legislation. HB 109 brings together a broad coalition of stakeholders, each of whom has some expertise in the state's existing waste and recycling and waste diversion efforts. And Mako is very appreciative of how open this bill sponsor has been to collaborating with counties on what is a very important issue. I would note that county governments are the principal actors charged with implementing the state's recycling goals, from operating the entire range of solid waste facilities to administering the collection infrastructure that enables widespread resident participation. Counties are broadly familiar with state recycling practices and are well placed to help make revisions to the Maryland Recycling Act. We commend the practical approach this legislation takes to advancing principles of zero waste at a time when the climate crisis continues to accelerate, and accordingly urge this committee to issue a favorable report.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Casemeyer, why don't you go next?
Hi, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm here on behalf of the Maryland Delaware Solid Waste Association, which, as you know, is the private sector waste and recycling industry. You've heard such good testimony today and you have a long afternoon, so I actually can say me too. And do note that breadth of the membership in the task force, public sector, private sector, community-based. Other than that, me too.
Okay, any question for either the sponsor, Delegate Love, or any of the panelists? Okay,
I do.
yes, Senator Carosa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the bill. And it's interesting because you were noting how long ago this was originally established and then the value of doing a task force now. And it has some similarities. For instance, we're doing the same thing with the trauma funding for the state of Maryland hasn't been looked at since 2003. But I wanted to also ask you, and the value of task force or work groups, for instance, in anaerobic digestion. I believe that we should take the same look that you're talking about. You're talking about taking a snapshot of where we are with recycling. Now that we're this far into it, do you see the value of having a work group or task force when you have a new technology?
Yes, and I believe there was a bill on that this session. I don't believe that bill advanced, although it was a really important one. My understanding is that it will come back.
Yeah, I'm the crossfile.
okay.
So I just, I do see the value of doing these work groups and task force the right way. I just think, you also need to do them when you have technology on the front end.
Absolutely. And I am hopeful that I believe your crossfile is sitting right behind me. And I am hopeful that bill will come back next year as well.
But it's kind of the infrastructure you
Yep,
use, a
I
task
agree.
force, a work group.
Yep,
Okay, thank you.
yep, Sure.
Okay, any additional questions? Senator Brooks.
Delegate, question, is manufacturing included on the task force? Because since they are part of the, I guess one would say they're part of the stream and generating.
No,
product.
manufacturing isn't a part of it. It's those who are actually involved in the processing of the recycling, the haulers, the counties, let's see, who else do we have? We have some environmental folks, large counties, small counties, recycling network, Maryland Environmental Service.
Yeah, but not the folks.
No, that's
Creating or generating.
that's the subject of another bill by your excellent colleague over there, Senator Augustine.
Oh, okay, all right,
Yeah.
okay, all right, thanks,
Sure.
Chair.
Okay, any additional questions for sponsor of the panel? Okay, seeing none, we do have one additional witness signed up, John Griffin. John, you want? You're good? Okay, that concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 109.
Thank you.
And we're going to next move to, I'm sorry. Well, he's testifying. Yeah, he's going to testify on the next one. Okay, Delegate Stein, why don't you come up here? And you've got your backup and Senator Rosapep sitting right behind you, but we're going to go to House Bill 503. And you've got sort of designated separate panels, so I'm not sure how you want to organize it, but you have Reverend Linda Moore, Mark Conway, and Mamie Parker as part of the first panel. Is that how you had it anticipated? Because there's several other people you've designated kind of in a separate set of sponsored panels. So however you want to do it.
Okay.
You've sort of designated three separate panels here. So, but this first panel is Reverend Linda Moore, Mark Conway, and Mamie Parker. And so 2 minutes each, okay?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
would it be possible for me to do it on my cross file after Delegate Stein?
Yes,
Thank you.
that would be fine.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, and committee members. For the record, Delegate Dana Stein in support of House Bill 503, the Green Space Equity Grant Program. And it's nice to be at the sponsor table with Senator Rosapep. In the House, this bill received very strong support from the body as well as from advocates, and is supported by DNR Secretary Kurtz, by MACO and MML. And in addition to the current secretary, Josh Kurtz, pleased that John Griffin, a previous DNR secretary is with us and will be available to help answer any questions. So the goal of this legislation is to increase green space in underserved and overburdened areas as we have previously defined them in law. And green space is fairly broadly defined, includes parks, community gardens, urban farms, green networks, and trail connections. We all know that green spaces are vital community assets. I mean, they're critical for public health, for recreation, and just for spending time outdoors. And in addition to all those public health and recreation benefits, they have a lot of environmental benefits, including reducing stormwater and in many communities, reducing the heat island effect. But the problem in many communities is twofold. First, there's some neighborhoods that do not have any public outdoor spaces, and that directly impacts the quality of life of residents. And the second problem is that many community members lack the mobility to be able to access a park or trail that might be a ways away. So these bills combined, HB 503 and SB 923, would target providing green spaces within or immediately adjacent to the communities. And specifically, the bill would set up a grant program within DNR to use part of DNR's share of program open space to acquire and improve green spaces for public access and use. Applicants can be local governments, nonprofits, land trusts. And the grants can also be used to acquire and improve green spaces, but they could also be used for capital improvements like park benches, playgrounds, or trees to make sure that the green space, once acquired, can continue to meet community needs. Now, with respect to funding, it starts at up to $5 million in fiscal year 2027, and then goes up to $10 million in fiscal year 2027 and every year afterward. One of the amendments that we added in the House was adding the phrase up to for each year in terms of the funding, and recognition of the possibility that program open space revenues might decline in future years. And then if that happened, then DNR would make a proportional reduction in the grants. And I do want to note that the funding, the program open space funding, would come out of DNR's share of POS. It adds another authorized use, just like the Rural Legacy Areas Program. Does not change the formula and does not impact POS funds allocated to any other programs like local governments, ag land preservation, heritage program, and others. And finally, the bill would create an advisory committee to help ensure that the program is equitable and does indeed meet the needs of the communities that it is that intends to serve. So with that, I urge a favorable report and turn things over to Senator Rosapep.
Okay, Senator Rosapep.
Thank you very, very much. One of the things I like about being in the Senate is that there are so many hardworking, smart, knowledgeable House members who work with advocates and with thinkers to come up with great bills, and then they need a Senate crossfile. And my bill falls in that category. And you've heard from the brain behind this, how it works. I don't think I need to explain it more to you. I think you did a great job of explaining it. I'll just make 2 points. One is I've been a supporter of program open space for many years since I was in the House. And over the years, we've made different kinds of changes in program open space to respond to the needs and wishes of our constituents. One of our former colleagues, Senator Edwards of Western Maryland, would say periodically in these issues, we got enough open space in my district. And he was right. But there are a lot of districts that don't have enough open space. And that's what this bill is designed to get at, is developments long-standing where they didn't plan ahead to have great parks. They didn't plan ahead to have great trails. They didn't plan ahead to have great recreation facilities. And the idea in this bill, which I think is terrific, of targeting some of the state open space money to come behind and try to get open space for folks in those situations is a really good idea, which is why I cross-filed the bill. I support the amendments from the House and have offered them, and happy to answer questions. No, I'm not happy to answer questions. I'm happy for Delegate Stein to answer questions. Thank you very much. Here's a favorable report.
Okay, maybe before we go, let's go through the full panel here. Just tell us your name. We'll just go down the row here and then we'll take some questions and we'll bid adieu to Senator Rosapep. Ma'am, everybody's got 2 minutes each, and you tell us your name.
Yes, thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman and Vice Chair, I'm Mamie Parker, and I'm the National chairman of the board of the Student Conservation Association, and it's a national nonprofit that works really to build the next generation of conservation leaders. In fact, here in the state of Maryland, we have worked really closely with Maryland Park Service to provide hands-on experience for young men and women to get in the outdoors and learn to be great stewards of the outdoors. We strongly support this bill because we know how important it is to access to nature and communities, especially for young children. And I like to say, and I'll continue to say, the children are waiting for lands like these, for opportunities like these. And as I think about children myself, I grew up in Southern Arkansas in the Mississippi Delta. My mother was an avid angler, and she took me fishing with her, and she took me outdoors. And it was because of her that I learned to have an appreciation for the outdoors. Every one of the girls and boys in my school did not have that opportunity. In fact, a large number of the girls in my 9th grade class were pregnant in the 9th grade. And it was simply because they didn't have that opportunity that I had. And I tell people all of the time, had I not been fishing, I would have been kissing. I spent those times outdoors, and this is what this bill is all about. It's a bill that's here to help us get more outdoor space for young girls like myself, not just in urban communities, but statewide for sure. It's a pleasure to work with organizations like the Student Conservation Association, Maryland Department of Natural Resources, as well as many of the professionals at here in Maryland. And I have the privilege of working with the Masonville Cove Environmental Education Center. And it's here the children are waiting for opportunities that they'll get. And so we strongly support this bill. Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate this time.
Okay, tell us your name.
Good afternoon. I'm Reverend Linda Boyd. I'm here on behalf of the Episcopal Diocese of Maryland. You've heard an incredible testimony today, and I know how busy you all are. So I won't repeat either my written testimony or repeat what was said. I would just like to be here as a person of faith who believes that each person is deserving of equal dignity and respect as a child of God. We strongly believe this, and we have supported reparations for a number of years and decades to repair the damage of racism past and present. Green open spaces should not be just for the wealthy few. It should be available to every child of God. We've heard the benefits of it. We've heard what it can do for everyone, and we strongly urge a favorable report on this bill. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Feldman and the members of the committee. My name is Mark Conway, and I'm here on behalf of the Chesapeake Conservancy, where I serve as the Executive Vice President of Programs on behalf and on behalf of Forever Maryland, where I serve on the Board of Directors. I'm also a council member, proudly representing the 4th District of Baltimore City Council. And I want to voice my strong support for this important piece of legislation, which would establish a green space equity program for the state of Maryland. I've been a resident of the city of Baltimore for 11 years now, and I've been involved in public service in different degrees throughout that time. The one thing that I noticed very early on during my time in Baltimore was that when a community has green space like nature or local parks or community gardens or other public open spaces, that community is in a much better position to grow and to thrive. It's a simple but powerful realization. It has real impacts on the health and well-being of many Marylanders. Unfortunately, for many communities in Maryland, there is a severe lack of green space, and that has a negative impact on the well-being of residents and for that community. Fewer trees and green space is associated with worse public health outcomes, lower home values, less investment, and ultimately worse living conditions. Communities and spaces like Baltimore have extremely limited resources, but still we found ways to creatively work with the little that we have to create pocket parks and urban farms and community gardens. As we invest in protection of green spaces statewide, we need to make sure that we're also investing in all communities. That's why this bill is so important. That's why we call it green space equity. I believe this legislation would help us to address the problem and create more green spaces in communities that need it most. And that's why I urge a favorable report on this legislation. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for sponsor Delegate Stein or this initial panel? Okay, seeing none. Oh, yes, I'm sorry, Vice Chair Kagan.
Delegate Stein, thank you for the bill. Thank you, Senator Rosapep, though he's gone. Thank you, the witnesses. I am just wanting to flag for you something that I have a little bit of PTSD about. Your amendment of up to $5 million and up to $7 million. I had that in a bill related to nonprofits and an important bill supporting our nonprofit sector. And guess what up to anything can be? It can be zero. So I just want to counsel you, and Governor Hogan's folks put in zero to support our nonprofit sector when it was up to $1 million. So I just want to suggest for your consideration, I'm not suggesting that the Moore Miller administration would do that, but putting that language in law leaves a lot of flexibility. And I might suggest that you consider tweaking that a little bit. Thank you,
Okay,
Mr. Chair.
thank you, Vice Chair. We did put that in at the request of DNR, which the Secretary was able to testify at the House hearing in strong support, and he did request that flexibility. And but I certainly hear your point.
Okay, any additional questions for sponsor? Okay, or the panel? Seeing none, I'm going to call up, thank you, Delegate Stein. I call up your next panel of, again, favorables, Josh Hastings, Edith Brooks. Is Edith here? Stephen Preston. And frankly, we have some other witnesses. I might just call them up as well. Kristen Harbison, why don't you just come up? We can just get these favorables up. And then I think we've got one more spot for Andrea Van Wyk. Okay, Andrea. Okay, sir, why don't you start and then we'll just go down the row. Each of you gets 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the committee. My name is Josh Hastings. I'm the Program and Policy Director for Forever Maryland. We are a statewide nonprofit that supports Maryland's approximately 36 local land trusts and conservation organizations. We support this bill establishment of the Green Space Equity Program for the purpose of increasing benefits of conservation and green space to important targeted areas of the state. A few years ago, there's a lot of folks that are asking the questions of, as to if or how the investments in conservation are done so equitably in Maryland. So a lot of us have been looking at that. In the meantime, rightfully so, Maryland has heavily invested in conservation of family farms, forests, critical habitat, heritage areas, parks, recreation fields, and a lot more. These investments bring about many co-benefits, as you've heard, including ensuring a future of local foods, connecting diverse communities, improving water quality, increasing climate resilience, increasing native species, and more. Over the past 8 months, my organization has had the great pleasure of convening about 30 other organizations from around the state to evaluate and support targeted investments in green space. This bill is about doing exactly that, targeting that investment. As you can see through digital mapping tools like DNR's Park Equity Mapper or the Chesapeake Conservation Partnership's Green Space Equity Mapper, it's become very clear to see digitally and to go visit where the state could focus those conservation dollars on green space investment. As you've heard, this bill is about overburdened and underserved communities. This was defined a few years ago. We wanted, of course, help make sure that those investments went to those areas. I think, as you know, at least 50% of the funds shall be used for green space acquisition. That is a direct intended use of the state's transfer tax and program open space. The other 50% could be used for enhancing green space within the targeted area. I won't go into to the rest of it. I'll leave that to the rest of the group. I'll just say thank you very much. Just say thank you very much. We've had a lot of groups that have worked together on this and trying to come to a common solution. So we really appreciate your looking at it. Thank you.
Next witness, please.
Good afternoon, committee. Thank you for hearing us today. I'm Steve Preston, and I come from the great city of Baltimore, from Parks and People. Parks and People has been working for the last 38, almost 39 years to expand green space throughout the city of Baltimore. And I can tell you that it is not equitable in the city of Baltimore. And that's true of many urban landscapes across this great state. In the city of Baltimore, we've got great things going on at the Inner Harbor, but within the wings of the Black Butterfly, there are youth who have never seen a stream, don't experience parks, and can't sit under the shade of a tree in the highest temperatures of the summertime. And that's what we've been working to try to cure within the city of Baltimore. Within these neighborhoods, there's high degree of violence, high degree of vacancy, and high degree of health indicators that point to both physical and mental health challenges for the most underserved residents. I'm here in support of this bill because over the last 8 years, through Parks and People and the support of the state and the city, we've been able to increase park access for 20% of the most underserved residents in Baltimore, but that is not enough. And this bill would go a long way in providing additional access, not just for the purchase and expansion of green space, but also the stewardship, which is equally as important to ensure that these spaces are the jewels of these neighborhoods for years to come. So I urge you to support this bill. It's something that I've advocated for my 9 years at Parks and People, and I hope it passes. So thank you again, and happy to answer any questions.
Next witness, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Edie Brooks. I'm a board member of the Turner Station Conservation Teams. Our committee organization has been diligently working to revitalize our overburdened and underserved historic African-American community. The creation, maintenance, and beautification of community green space is important to us. There was a bus stop on Turner Station's entryway. The adjacent land was privately owned, and Turner Station Conservation Teams got permission to use it. We created a comfortable and attractive green space for our bus stop that was used by our residents for years. One day we happened to see a sign on the property that said an auction was being held the next day. In desperation, I called Neighbor Space's previous executive director, Barbara Hopkins. Bright and early the next morning, she was at the auction, prepared to bid for the property. What commitment. Unfortunately, Barbara was outbid, but Neighbor Space made a valiant effort. Unfortunately, Barbara, I'm so sorry, on our behalf. However, sometimes it takes more than a valiant effort. Sometimes more resources are needed. The Urban Green Space Equity Program could provide the means to save such properties. Sadly, now, instead of seeing a bus stop with benches and beautiful green space, every day we see a paved lot filled with cars and equipment inside a tall chain link fence. It sits on our main street, and it's heartbreaking. One day, months later, in 2019, I was riding past a lot on another gateway to Turner Station, and I noticed the faded old for sale sign that had been there for years. But this particular day, I heard a small voice say, "Call Neighbor Space." We did. And once again, Neighbor Space said yes. 3 years later, in October 2022, we had a grand ribbon cutting to celebrate the opening of beautiful Chestnut Park. We still need funds for benches, signage, raised garden beds, etc. The Urban Green Space Equity Program could provide the help that we need to improve our new park. I believe that establishing this program in the DNR would be transformational for communities like Turner Station that are all over Maryland. Please vote yes for House Bill 503.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Kristen Harbison, Political Director for Maryland League of Conservation Voters, here in strong support of the Green Space Equity Program. Last year, the terms overburdened and underserved were codified into law. Codifying these definitions creates the opportunities to specify program and support structures to benefit communities too long overlooked or left behind. The Green Space Equity Program seeks to deliver more equity for neighborhoods across the state of Maryland in the form of access to healthy green spaces. Most of my life has been spent in urban areas. My childhood in Racine, Wisconsin revolved around West Park, which was a block of grass surrounded by a world of dilapidated concrete, brick, and asphalt. When I moved to Baltimore, I chose to live where I did because of the presence of St. Mary's Park, which is the heart of our community. Proximity to green space has been critical throughout my life to suppress sometimes debilitating anxiety and depression. My experience is not unique. A 2021 peer-reviewed article in the Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health found people with more exposure to nature had improved cognitive function, brain activity, blood pressure, mental health, more physical activity, and better sleep. We all need access to nature for both physical and mental well-being. Relatedly, during the long days of COVID lockdowns and indoor restrictions, our parks and open spaces saw an overwhelming uptick of use. In response, last year, this body passed the Great Maryland Outdoors Act, recognizing both the importance of our state park system and its need for resources. This bill builds on that bill and ensures that those who have borne a larger share of environmental burdens from air and noise pollution to urban heat island effect will benefit from these funds. HB 503 is an excellent bill, and we strongly urge a favorable report. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Feltman, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the Education, Energy, and Environment Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today in support of House Bill 503. For the record, my name is Andrea Van Wyck, and I'm representing the Maryland, DC chapter of the Nature Conservancy. I serve as our Baltimore Community Project Manager for the city's program. I lead TNC's community engagement efforts to support under-resourced communities in gaining increased access to green spaces and improving their climate resiliency through nature-based solutions. One example, the Turner Station Witness Trees Project, is a multi-partnership effort that seeks to strengthen community, enhance their capacity, and grow their power. Its ultimate goal is to enable equitable access to nature and its protective and restorative benefits. Community leaders have recognized witness trees as a part of their, quote, environmental renaissance, end quote. These types of projects open doors for communities who have historically been excluded from the environmental movement. The project team has engaged with a multi-generational group of community members to co-develop witness trees as an expression of cultural identity and ecological sustainability. Native trees installed in November of 2022 were placed in key areas to provide shade, mitigate stormwater, improve air quality, and increase urban biodiversity. State, federal, and private funding have supported tree plantings, green space development, and maintenance for this project. The Green Space Equity Program would provide financial support for projects like witness trees in urban communities across Maryland, thereby increasing access to green space benefits for all Marylanders. TNC thanks Senator Rosapep and Delegate Stein for advancing this legislation, and we urge a favorable report on House Bill 503 and Senate Bill 923. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Senator Carrozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to welcome Josh Hastings. His other hat, he is a member of the Wycomico County Council. So my first question is for you, and then I have a question for Ms. Harbison as well. My question, Mr. Hastings, is looking at it from Forever Maryland and also with your county government hat, where do you, looking at Wycomico, the Lower Shore, where do you envision this program would be put to good use?
Well, a great question. I appreciate it, Senator. Well, I'll say, for most of my life, I lived in Salisbury, Maryland, and for many years we were always second to Baltimore City in the worst ways, and the statistics that nobody wants. Salisbury is a bigger city, quote unquote, for a rural community. What we wanted to do was to make sure that communities like Salisbury were included, communities like Cambridge, and others were actually included to be able to get the benefits, and not just Baltimore City, though the need is great in Baltimore City. There's a lot of rural areas that have thriving smaller cities that really need the investment, and a lot of jurisdictions, many of them across the state, counties, they have their own local transfer tax. Wycomico is one where we don't. So we have a less of an ability to put money into these funds. So our thought was to try to target it to make sure the whole state could benefit.
Salisbury, which we have seen the revitalization there, but you would not limit it necessarily. You mentioned rural, you would picture this also in a Crisfield or a Princess Anne, or
even the Pittsfield. We actually did the mapping together. There's little slices of other areas across that are very small communities, but could still benefit.
Thank you. One follow-up for Ms. Harbison, please. You and I go back to our days on House Appropriations Committee, and valued working with you then. And when we talk about budgets, I think we learned this from Chair Maggie McIntosh, that budgets are really you're really talking about priorities. So when we talk about the priorities of the municipalities and counties that might not have had the resources in the past to invest in the green space. Probably because there's other priorities like public safety and also housing. So I guess kind of putting this in context, where I'm going with my question is, I look at this as you're using the term green space equity program. I look at it almost like a green space expansion program, maybe in those areas where, because there's been other priorities, those political subdivisions have not been able to invest. And so I guess asking you, because, you know, you did use the terms, we now have, we've defined on underserved and the terms we're using. Is this more about looking at maybe where we need to go in and make these investments, as opposed to when I hear the earlier panel talk about reparations and going down that road? Is this more about where we just need to invest now, or?
Yes, I think that's correct. I think so. When we looked at, so the General Assembly defined overburdened and underserved last year as part of the Climate Solutions Now Act. And they're very specific, and is a way to identify communities that have been that have had historical disinvestment. And that have had disproportionate burdens of pollution burden. And that tracks in a lot of different ways. You can track it by looking at health data, you can track it by looking at economic data. And if you look at, and I'd be happy to send you the point in the code where we created those definitions, and you can see the different pieces of it, the different pieces of how we're creating those things. And that does represent, between the two terms, it is not, we think about it as being just Baltimore City, and you've heard a lot of Baltimore City here, and I live in Baltimore City, obviously, but it is something that is true around the state, and it is about identifying the places where there have been historical disinvestment, that where we do need to put into, where we need to focus our resources to expand access so everybody has the same benefits to open space and green and parks.
I understand the terms, but
Right.
I think my point that I'm putting out there is that sometimes when there's you don't have the investment in certain priorities, it's because there are other priorities were more dominant at that, you know, that maybe Salisbury was spending more money on public safety and housing and couldn't spend the money on putting in parks. That's my point. And that's more about priorities and not so much about is there someone to blame for that situation?
Oh, yeah, no, it's absolutely not about somebody to blame for the situation. I would absolutely agree that it's about where we should be putting resources now.
And I have a quick point that might help with this clarification. So in the city of Baltimore, through the Hogan administration, there's been a great degree of demolition that's taken place across the city on many vacants, still many more to go. And this bill would allow that land, which is sometimes privately held, to be purchased with funding that does not currently exist, because the City Rec and Parks Department is underfunded by 60% of what it was 50 years ago, to buy this land, much like my friend here from Baltimore County was talking about, and protect it in perpetuity so it can be an access to neighborhoods that did not have these threads of green in them before, because they were dense when they were factory towns, et cetera. And that's true. I've seen it in Cambridge on Ray Street. You know, there's a lot of demo that's taken place there, all the way out to Frederick, Hagerstown, all across the state. There's areas like that where demo is taking place, and these threads of green can help reknit these neighborhoods back together as they begin to grow and thrive.
Okay, any additional questions for this panel? Okay, seeing none, we do have some additional witnesses. I'm going to call up Kenneth Phelps. Mr. Phelps here. Got Angelica Bailey. Angelica from MML. Where's Angelica? Is Angelica here from MML? Okay, and she's out there. Call her in. John Griffith, you're okay? Okay, if we don't get Angelica in here, we'll go. We've got some virtual witnesses as well.
She municipally sent in a letter.
Okay.
She told me she couldn't.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, now we've got some virtual witnesses, and then we'll be done with this bill. Moria, let's start with Denise Guitarra. Ms. Guitarra. Okay, you've got 2 minutes. Again, we're on House Bill 503.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Denise Guitarra, Maryland Conservation Advocate for Nature Forward. I'm here to advocate in favor of House Bill 503, Green Space Equity Program. Nature Forward's mission is to inspire residents of the greater Washington, D.C. region to appreciate, understand, and protect their natural environment through outdoor experiences, education, and advocacy. Green Space Equity Program is an environmental justice bill. Nature Forward has heard firsthand from disfavored communities across Maryland, which share many similar concerns and would benefit from direct funding for the stewardship of new and existing green spaces. Protecting our green spaces now will help to build healthy and climate resilient communities for Maryland's future. Since 2019, Nature Forward has worked with a majority Latinx immigrant community in Long Branch, located in Silver Spring, Maryland. This area is an urbanized area undergoing purple line construction in a narrow Long Branch stream valley cutting through the community. Most of these families come from countries where their connections to nature was and is part of their culture. Across these years, we have seen the community members express the need to see more urban tree canopy and increase access to green spaces for outdoor recreation activities for their families' health and well-being. Furthermore, the Long Branch community has expressed the same ideas to Montgomery Parks as they undergo their Long Branch Park initiative, which will renovate 9 parks along the Long Branch Trail in the next few years. Nature Forward and our 28,000 members and supporters recommends that the Senate Education, Energy, and Environment Committee supports the passage of HB 503 SB 923. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Okay, any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you. We're going to next go to Phyllis Joris. Ms. Joris, 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, committee. My name is Phyllis Joris. I'm the Executive Director of Neighbor Space of Baltimore County. We're a land trust that works inside the urban rural demarcation zone in Baltimore County with a focus on communities that are environmentally overburdened and historically underserved. Our mission is to enhance the livability of these communities by protecting and then improving land for parks, gardens, trails, and natural areas. Ms. Brooks just told you about Chestnut Park. That's one of our latest, our newest parks in Turner Station. Neighbor Space believes that House Bill 503 is absolutely necessary if this state is to address its lack of open space in earnest. Our urban communities all around the state are in dire need of green space, and land trusts such as Neighbor Space are perfectly positioned to help fill the need. We are, however, stretched very thin. I was just speaking with a colleague before this meeting, and we both work crazy hours trying to help as many communities as we can by preserving or building green space in their neighborhoods. And I have right now 3 communities on my wait list who are hoping to hear back from me that we can help. Acquiring urban land is often costly. And then in an urban setting, simply preserving it is not enough for that land to really work for that community to benefit the environment and the neighbors. We need to invest hours of staff time, thousands of dollars in community engagement, restoration, and then stewardship. So Chestnut Park is finished. It's beautiful. There are still elements that need to be constructed. And then, of course, there's the forever task of stewarding it. And that's one of only 19 public sites we have. And as I said, there's many more that are hoping to become neighbor space sites. So I hope you will vote in favor of House Bill 503. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for the witness? Seeing none. Next virtual witness is Timothy Mail. Mr. Mail. Is he here? Okay. Mr. Mail there? No? Okay, and final witness, Catherine Latar. Ms. Latarin?
Yes.
Okay, there you go. You've got 2 minutes.
My name is Katie Lauder. I'm the Executive Director of Baltimore Green Space, and Baltimore Green Space is a conservation land trust in Baltimore that works to protect green spaces in Baltimore City. I'm excited to encourage your support of House Bill 503, the proposed Green Space Equity Program, and thank you for your consideration of this bill. For the past 12 years, I've been serving community leaders in under-resourced communities who create and care for green spaces, and this program would provide them with access to funding that they need for capital improvements on green spaces in neighborhoods. Additionally, I've been working with other land trust leaders who, like me, often face barriers to accessing acquisition funds needed to protect smaller spaces in towns and cities serving under-resourced communities. The majority of the acreage thresholds to access conservation funds are set to privilege the protection of larger spaces or geared to rural areas, or both. Having access to funds to secure lands that are on smaller parcels in highly populated communities is essential. Towns and cities which have more people, more industry, more development, and with dwindling green areas need resources to ensure that their last remaining green and wild spaces are secured for future generations to have accessible local windows into the wider wild. In Baltimore alone, there are over 800 community green spaces and over 1,000 community forests that are vulnerable to development. Much of this land falls in historically redlined neighborhoods that experienced discriminatory disinvestment in the past. This is a pattern that repeats in most towns and cities in one form or another across Maryland. The Green Space Equity Program would provide another tool for these under-resourced communities to improve and secure essential green spaces to protect the environmental health of their neighborhoods. We hope you'll be part of moving this important legislation forward to increase equity in Maryland's conservation efforts. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for the witness? Okay, seeing none, you have a question? You don't have a question? Okay. I'm sorry?
Right before you wrap up this hearing.
Okay, I'm about to wrap up this last
Okay.
witness.
Last witness. Thank you. Mr. Chair, just because he's being so thoughtful about our time, but he's in the room, I just do want to recognize former DNR, Department of Natural Resources Secretary John Griffin. He also was General Manager of the Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission. He was Chief of Staff to a former governor. He has served this state and our environment magnificently for many decades. And Mr. Griffin, it's just great to have you in the room. Thank you for your continued advocacy.
Okay, thank you for that. That was, appreciate you doing that. That concludes bill hearing on House Bill 503. Before we go to your other bill, Senator Stein, I see Delegate Kaiser and I think Delegate Terraza. They have a very short bill hearing. So I'm going to call Delegate Kaiser up on House Bill 1051. And then I think we've got Delegate Taveras here on behalf of Prince George's delegation. She'll go next. So Delegate Kaiser, you've got the time you need. We do have one virtual witness from the AG's office after you, but take the time you need to explain 1051.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you on behalf of both Delegate Taveras and I, so we can get back to HGO on our much briefer bills. This is House Bill 1051. So again, thank you. Thank you to all the members, the esteemed committee. I'm here on behalf of House Bill 1051, the Public Information Act. Decisions of the State Public Information Act Compliance Board Appeals, quite a long name. And I believe Patrick from the Office of the Attorney General's office will describe anything technical about it and explain the amendments. But basically just clarifies that once a decision of the PIA, which is the Public Information Act, that when the PIA Compliance Board, when it's appealed to a circuit court, that a losing party in circuit court can appeal it to the Maryland's appellate courts. This is true with other quasi-adjudicative decisions by state administrative agencies. And there was a thought that this was missed by not including it for the PIA Compliance Board. I'll just, I can point you to the my written testimony with the amendments and also just mention that the bill passed unanimously in the House of Delegates, and thank you for your support.
Okay, thank you, Delegate Kaiser. Any questions for sponsor? Delegate Kaiser, Vice Chair Kagan.
No.
Oh, okay. Okay. Any other questions for the sponsor? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Delegate Kaiser. We are going to pull up Patrick Hughes from the AG's office. Mr. Hughes. Oh, there you are. Okay, you've got 2 minutes to weigh in however you see fit.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Patrick Hughes. I'm the Chief Counsel for Opinions and Advice with the AG's office. And this bill seeks to clarify two ambiguities about appeals from decisions of the PIA Compliance Board. First, the bill clarifies, as Delegate Kaiser said, after a compliance board decision is appealed to circuit court, it can then be further appealed to Maryland's appellate courts. That's already the case for similar types of decisions under the Maryland Administrative Procedure Act. But this bill borrows language from the APA to make clear that the same rule would apply to PIA compliance board decisions. And it's important that appellate courts be able to serve as the final word in that context for two reasons. The first is that the issues that arise under the PIA are as important as the issues that arise under the Administrative Procedure Act. We should want the appellate courts to have a chance to weigh in. And second is, in the absence of appellate review, circuit court judges around the state might come to different conclusions about the same legal issues that come before the compliance board. And because circuit court judges don't have to follow each other's decisions, there would be no way to ensure consistency of the law on that point. And it's going to lead to inconsistent interpretations of the PIA. And then the second change, which was suggested by the Public Access Ombudsman and was made during amendments on the House side, is to make clear that a PI requester can appeal a decision by the PI Compliance Board to Circuit Court when that decision finds that the requester's request was vexatious or in bad faith. That type of dispute was added to the Compliance Board's jurisdiction in 2021. But in apparent oversight, the appeal provisions weren't updated to make clear that requesters could appeal that type of decision. They can already appeal other types of decisions, so this just fills that gap. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any question for Mr. Hughes from the AG's office? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on House Bill 1051. Thank you, Delegate Kaiser. And
Thank you, Senator.
we'll bring up Delegate Taveras on behalf of Prince George's County Delegation, House Bill 1026. And you're the only witness, Delegate Taveras, and just kind of take the time you need, and then that will be the only testimony on this bill. Yeah.
Hi, Chair Feldman. Unfortunately, I have 0 key lime pies.
Not everybody knows the inside joke there, but that's okay. I had delivered a key lime pie over at HGO to Chair Delegate Pena-Melnick because she said that because I didn't show up in person last week, I had to come this week with a pie, and I did deliver it to HGO. So it was, yeah, any event. Okay, it's up. You got the floor, House Bill 1026.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Feldman and Vice Chair Kagan. And committee members, including my esteemed senator. It is an honor to be before this prestigious body, and I'm here to ask for a favorable report on HB 1026 as amended by the House Environment and Transportation Committee and the Prince George's County Senate delegation. This bill authorizes the Prince George's County to exercise powers of eminent domain to acquire neglected, blighted property 1/4 mile from a designated transit-oriented development or Purple Line station and within a business improvement district with the goal of redeveloping or revitalizing said property for a public use. The bill prohibits the property from being state-owned land and taken without just compensation to the entitled party, as agreed on between the parties or awarded by a jury. Infrastructure such as highways, trains, and light rails have been known to be unforgiving of communities of color throughout the county by dividing those who have with those who have not. Redlining exacerbated poverty extremes throughout the United States, as detailed in Richard Rothstein's The Color of Law. Right here in the state of Maryland, the Beltway achieves this within Prince George's County between the wealthier, more Caucasian, wealthier communities outside the Beltway compared to the concentrated poverty found within communities of color inside the Beltway. More recently, we have also seen dramatic displacements of community of color due to the light rail developments along H Street in Northwest DC and San Jose in California. In extreme cases, we find property owners engaging in benign neglect with the goal of profit maximizing, resulting in the gentrification of a community by selling to the highest bidder, driving up pricing, and making it unaffordable for established residents to age in place. In closing, the Prince George's County needs HB 1026 to have agency in its own growth and revitalization, while providing a way to preserve from and give voice to the community in any future property developments. More specifically, HB 1026 will facilitate the implementation of the county's General Plan 2035 and help preserve as many communities as possible along the Blue Line and Purple Line corridors. As such, I humbly ask for your favorable recommendation of HB 1026 as amended by the House Environment Transportation Committee and the Prince George's County Senate delegation. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Senator Augustine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to welcome my Delegate Tavares here to this, to our committee. And I also just wanted to share that we did vote as a delegation last night. If we are not already in possession, we will be in possession of it as amended, as the delegate recommended, or as the delegate said. So thank you so much. And do you agree that this is a good bill?
Thank you. I do.
Great.
I think it's very targeted and it incentivizes change quickly.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for your testimony, and that concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 1026. We're going to go back to you, Delegate Stein, for your second bill.
Thank you.
House Bill 1214, and you've got Laurel Peltier here as your sponsored panelist.
Yes.
Again, on House Bill 1214, and we'll take your time to present the bill.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair. For the record, Delegate Dana Stein on behalf of House Bill 1214. This bill deals with retail energy choice, especially solicitations for green energy from those companies. And in the past year, I've received eight or more solicitations from a clean energy retail supplier trying to get me to switch my power. I'm happy with my standard offer service, so I've just filed them away. Like similar companies, this retail supplier advertises 100% clean, pollution-free energy. But during the past year, as I was getting successive mailers from this company, I wondered, how does a consumer confirm that the energy supplied by these companies who advertise clean, pollution-free energy, that energy is indeed clean and pollution-free? So as amended in the House, this bill will require that any retail supplier that is marketing green energy with green energy defined in the bill has to provide a particular disclosure in its solicitations. And that disclosure is as follows. If you purchase this energy plan, you are agreeing to purchase local utility distribution grid electricity that is paired with renewable energy credits, RECs, in an amount sufficient to match the percent of green power electricity in your contract. So in other words, the marketing material must indicate that the retail supplier is purchasing sufficient RECs to match the green electricity that is being sold to consumers. So I urge the committee to give a favorable vote to this bill. I consider it to be consumer protection, disclosure of the fact that if someone is advertising a particular product, that indeed it matches up to the energy that has been purchased by that supplier. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we'll go to your panelists right there, and you've got 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Feldman and Vice Chair Kagan and committee members. I am Laurel Peltier of the Maryland Energy Advocates Coalition. I'm also AARP's utility advocate, and retail choice and its impact on utility bills is my specialty. The issue this bill addresses is truth in advertising. At least 25% of the retail choice accounts in the state have switched to a green power, 100% renewable energy offer. That's over 110,000 accounts. And I work very closely with lots of households, and they tell me across the board, they're very happy to be supporting clean energy because that's what they were sold. Wind power that's fed into the local grid. That's the product they think they bought. Why are these 100,000-ish families paying on average $400 more a year for this so-called renewable energy? Because that's what retail suppliers market, with pictures of wind turbines, solar panels and clean skies, consumers are told they're buying 100% renewable electricity. They're saving the planet, and they're even lowering carbon emissions. Yet consumers are not paying this much more for real wind energy. And it's extremely hard, and this is the real key point, if not impossible, to figure that out with our current lack of green power regulations. After serious digging, I wrote a 16-page report on this, and consumers are buying the same grid electricity paired with unbundled voluntary RECs. The vast majority of these RECs are from faraway states, old dams in Washington, old wind farms. We don't really even know where these RECs are from. This bill does two things. It includes the disclosure that Delegate Stein mentioned, and that's printed and included on all marketing and contracts. And it also requires suppliers to report to the best of their ability to the PSC what additional RECs were purchased. And we did coordinate with the PSC on this bill. We worked together to make sure that it would work for everybody. So thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you. Any question for Delegate Stein or the panelists? We'll start with Senator Gallion, and then we'll go to Senator Augustine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. I had a question about the definition of green power. I was looking on the bill, and it has, lists a few things, but there's a couple I didn't see. So I wanted to see where they fit in. Things like woody biomass, anaerobic digestion. Is there a reason they're not stated in there?
Because I guess the reason is because I think customers would not assume green power to be woody biomass or anaerobic digestion. They would assume it to be a renewable source, but typically not woody biomass. But certainly if the committee feels that those should be added within the definition of green power, that I don't think there would be any, I would have any opposition to that.
Okay. And then is green power in any other statutes, or is this the first time it's like that term is used? Because I don't remember seeing those two words in anything else. I'm just curious.
Yeah, Senator, I'm not aware of any other statute that has that term. I can't say it did an exhaustive search, but I'm not aware of any other statutory reference.
Okay, Senator Augustine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much, Delegate Stein, for bringing this forward, and Laurel for your work, for your hard work on this topic, which is really, it's just awful. In my, I get them every day too. I get a lot of them at my house, and then a lot for my neighbors. With that being said, oftentimes we hear from the Office of People's Counsel. Have you seen the letter that they sent? Can you all respond to, have you seen some of the questions that the Office of People's Counsel, who oftentimes is really a very, very strong advocate for our consumers, some of the things that they put forward? And did you work with them in trying to figure this thing out?
Senator, I can't say I saw the most recent letter, the one submitted to this committee. Certainly did see the letter that was submitted to the House side. Believe the Office of People's Counsel would like this bill to be stronger, to have stronger protections or representations. No argument from me with respect to a number of those issues, but I'm here presenting the bill as it came out of the House.
Okay, I understand that. I really do. Thank you very much.
Okay, Senator Hester.
Thank you, and it's good to see you, Delegate Stein. I just had a question for Ms. Peltier. You mentioned that you had worked with the Public Service Commission, and I am sympathetic to the problem that you started off, by talking about with the frequent calls. But on this particular instance, are there complaints about the issues, and that have been filed with the PSC?
Yes, there are. When consumers use the PSC complaint system, there have been complaints that people expected one product, which is real wind power electricity, purchased on their behalf. What people are basically, and I'm going to share, these are eco buyers, and they're pretty smart. And it's very interesting because I work with many, many, many low-income families, and I've been helping a lot of eco buyers. And generally what they tell me at first is, you got it wrong, Laurel. This really is real wind power. That's how hard it is to figure out that this is a rec-based product. It's not written anywhere, or it's in little teeny weeny font on page 4. So people have sent in complaints to the PSC and said they don't think that they got the product that they bought. I don't know how many. I'm sure we can find out, because generally it's for different situations.
Appreciate, I mean, if we could get some concrete examples, that would really, really help me out. Maybe follow up offline. And then just because, energy is new to this committee, I mean, still coming up to speed on RECs, but I mean, and apologies if this is the wrong question to ask. Does this bill challenge the fundamental premise of the REC system saying it's not working?
No, it does not.
Okay, because I thought that was like the currency that we traded electric, renewable energy credits in.
Yes, Senator, it doesn't change the REC system. All it says is that if a retail energy supplier is advertising green energy, that it has to provide a disclosure saying that it is purchasing enough RECs to cover the green energy that is being purchased by this particular consumer and any other consumers that have such contracts.
Process.
No.
Okay.
There is, as Senator, I mean, certainly retail suppliers, utilities are required to purchase a certain amount of their the power that they sell as RECs, but there's no requirement that it match the amount of power that is sold as being green energy by a particular supplier.
It's not your fault.
Well, could I just say, I think I haven't read the most recent office people. I think one of the points I believe we're making when I did talk to the People's Council was we have a renewable energy standard. And so even if they have purchased RECs, it may not be in sufficient quantity that's even meeting the numbers and the requirements that we've passed in state law. So they may be purchasing RECs that are sort of below that number, but then under the way your bill's written, that would potentially be adequate for purposes of your bill. I don't want to get into the weeds, but there are some issues the Office of People's Council raised that, are legitimate. And so that said, any additional questions, Senator Lewis Young, and then we do have a panel of unfavorables, so as well.
Delegate Stein, nice seeing you 2 days in a row. I'm going to direct my question to Ms. Peltier because I believe I heard you say that this bill is about transparency, but I don't see anything in the bill about how many RECs or percentage of RECs a supplier must buy in order to call itself green. If this is about transparency, shouldn't that issue be addressed?
Great question and an interesting topic because when a retail supplier markets green power, it is generally 100% renewable energy, which is very appealing to people to spend their money and get green power. The RPS, let's say it goes up to 25% right now, all utilities and suppliers will be buying that. This is talking about the extra RECs to fill in from the 25% to the 100%. They're voluntary RECs. Retailers market that they're 100% and then they buy the RPS, which they have to, and they report to the PSC, and then they buy these voluntary unbundled RECs. This disclosure, where I think the point comes in to explain, it says at the end of it that really what it tells consumers is you're getting grid electricity and you're getting renewable energy certificates, and that's new information. So at least they have a breadcrumb to go look at, what is this product I'm buying? Because people do a lot of research on this. And it says that you're buying these RECs in an amount sufficient to match the percent of green power that's in your contract. So most of them say 100%. There are a few contracts out there that say up to 50%. So this is just letting the consumer know this is the product you're buying and that these retailers are purchasing RECs to match your contract. Did that answer your question? Not really.
It's moving in that direction. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, Senator Watson.
Thank you. So on the last page of the bill, this is suggested language that would go to the consumer as a disclosure, right?
That's correct.
And so Delegate Stein, I'm thinking in terms of my 80-year-old mother, this is a foreign language. I mean, it literally she would say, son, this makes no sense. What I care about is saving money and helping save the environment. But is there a better way to, define renewable energy credits? I know this is the concept we've been using, but it is really confusing, even to me. And I've been looking at it for, a month or so now. But this definition, I think for the average person is almost meaningless. So, and you haven't seen it, but I'm sure you will. The OPC's suggestion, after, several paragraphs, the last one kind of suggests a study to try to figure this out. And it says, given the complexities of the issue, suggest the General Assembly instruct PSC to promulgate regulations that fulfill the intent. And it has a couple of things. One, require suppliers that want to make green marketing claims to buy the desired RECs, define what percentage of RECs above the RPS requirement, et cetera, et cetera. Rather than moving forward in this, and I just have to believe my heart of hearts, this is not going to make any sense to a lot of people. Could we look at it another way? I think what I heard, the intent is to validate the marketing claims by some of these suppliers. But that claim can be done kind of behind the wall to satisfy the intent, but another way to articulate it and validate it to the end user, to the consumer. I don't think that this gets it. And I mean, do you have some other language you could possibly propose?
Senator, as introduced in the House, that disclosure language was more detailed. You may see in that paragraph that the last 2.5 lines are taken out. As introduced, it would have said that from one or more of the following sources: solar, wind, geothermal, et cetera. Now, the House decided to truncate the disclosure, and I certainly respect that, but leaving the REC reference without any description of the potential sources or renewable sources that include RECs. So that, again, I can understand your concern that the disclosure as is presented here may not mean a whole lot. Certainly if the committee feels that there's a better way to write this disclosure, certainly open to that.
Okay, additional questions? Senator Simon.
Thank you. It's a pleasure seeing you, Delegate Stein. This committee is getting new up on energy. This first year that we've had energy in this committee. Some of them came from finance and habits, but so I'm trying to wrap my head around a lot of this. And one of the areas, and I see it was stricken in the original bill, was that you could select from one or more tier 1 renewable sources. And then it seems to go and define green power. So can you explain why we struck, because I thought tier 1 was our highest renewable portfolio that we would choose from. So why are we deviating from that policy?
Senator, I'm not sure if, honestly, I can't speak to the intent as to why the specific renewable energy sources were struck. I think there is a general feeling that rather than specifying just the renewable sources that qualifies a REC, that any sort of REC should be deemed to be eligible. So that's why, at least in the disclosure, the last 2 lines were taken out. I don't know if that helps, but
it seems to me, just from quick reading of this, that green power is a subset of tier 1. So were we trying to limit some of the sources, renewable sources in tier 1?
Initially, as the bill came in, as I introduced the bill, it would have been just renewable sources: solar, wind, geothermal, a few others. But that specificity again was taken out in the bill as it came out of the House.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Senator August.
Okay, Delegate Stein.
Yes.
I hope that we can just get back to where this began. Is this bill around really talking about marketing practices that are confusing to consumers and maybe don't give them complete information? Was that sort of the nature of why you brought this forward?
Yes, yes. My concern was if someone gets a solicitation like I have, like you, apparently you have, Senator, and many other Marylanders have, that says that a source of power is green. The assumption is that it is somehow renewable energy. And so initially there was a reporting requirement under the bill and also a disclosure requirement. The reporting requirement was taken out by the House and left with this disclosure requirement. But my thought was that at least someone who's getting this type of solicitation should know they're buying energy associated with a renewable energy credit. Again, I would have preferred that it specify solar, wind, geothermal, et cetera. But in the end, it just has to be a renewable energy credit.
Okay. And so that's really what you're trying to get at with this piece of legislation on, you know, it's getting kind of confusing, but that's really the
Yes, sir.
nature of it. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. We do have a virtual witness signed up favorable. Before we go to the unfavorables, I've got Ann Manuel. Is Miss Manuel here?
Yeah, yes, I am.
Okay, you got 2 minutes. And again, we're on House Bill 1214, and you're signed up favorable.
Thank you very much. My name is Ann Manuel, and I've lived in Silver Spring, Maryland for 38 years, and I'm here on behalf of myself urging a favorable report on this bill. Because of our deep concern about the threat climate change poses to our world, my husband and I have been willing for several years to pay a premium to have our electricity come from renewable sources. That's why we chose WGL Energy's Clean Step Wind Program Power for our home in Silver Spring and a cabin in Myersville, Maryland. We were assured by the company's literature that, and I quote, Clean Step's wind power covers 100% of your electricity usage and is composed of 100% wind energy, end quote. We paid a premium of more than $1,000 last year to WGL for what we believe to be wind power. But we've learned that the company's claims, like claims by many other third-party electricity suppliers, are misleading. WGL is not selling us power generated by wind. The company is not buying wind power on our behalf. We are getting the same mix of the local power grid supply as our neighbors who have not opted for 100% clean energy and are not paying a premium. Instead, the company is selling us RECs. And as I understand it, a REC is a bookkeeping measure indicating that a megawatt of renewable energy has been generated. My premium does not purchase wind power. I feel like I've been had. But potentially more serious than the fact that my family has been misled by green power marketing is the potential impact these misunderstandings can have on the climate. I'm sure we're not the only family or business in Maryland who has believed that we no longer needed to conserve energy, since our usage was, we thought, actually encouraging renewable energy production. Families like ours were not only paying more, but using more. So instead of easing the climate crisis, false green energy claims are making it worse. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for our witness? Seeing none, thank you, Delegate Stein. Witness, yes?
I just want to say, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay with you, we're voting in E&T, so if I
Yes.
could be excused.
Yeah,
to head on
absolutely.
back.
Well,
Thank you.
that's the extent of the favorable testimony we're going to bring up now. Yes, feel free to get back to work back on the other side of the street. Unfavorable panel, Richard Reinhardt, John Fiastro, Mac Middleton. I do not see Mac Middleton. Katie Nash is signed up for information. Why don't you just come up, Katie, and that'll be the extent of the testimony on this bill. So who wants to lead off? You want to lead off? Okay, John Fiastro, and each of you has 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of this committee. For the record, John Fiastro on behalf of my client, NRG. NRG is a publicly traded Fortune 500 company, 6 million customers nationwide, a retail supplier, a retail electricity supplier. NRG asked for an unfavorable report for this committee. The advocates and the lobbyists on the previous panel you heard from talked about problems with the RECs, that RECs are confusing. RECs, SRECs, ORECs, this committee has heard about each one of these RECs over the course of this session. RECs are a general accounting principle of renewable energy generation. A REC and its attribution. A REC and ownership says that you own that wind energy. It is the currency of the realm. The EPA agrees with this. The Federal Trade Commission agrees with this. PJM, other regional transmission operators recognize a REC as the currency of the realm. This is how we talk about renewable electricity. By owning it, by owning a wind REC, you own wind energy. So the previous panelist that was virtual, she might not understand it. She might think that it's wrong, but this is the way we calculate it. This is the accounting by which we have created the state's renewable energy portfolio standard. Our standard depends on the recognition and the certainty that a REC is clean energy. The disclosure in the bill and this legislation suggests that there's something nefarious, something wrong with the REC, and that customers being misled, when in fact, this is not true. Retailers who buy RECs own clean energy. Mr. Chairman, I have one more comment to make, if you'll indulge me.
Okay, go on.
The language in the bill and the disclosure undermines the integrity of the RPS. And indeed, if you look at the People's Council testimony, not John Fiastra, not NRG, but the People's Council testimony, the bill provides the disclosure language and there are unintended consequences. It reads, a supplier, if you look on the second page, middle paragraph, a supplier could call its offer green by simply complying with the RPS law, purchasing only minimum RECs to meet the RPS and nothing more. So in an attempt to protect consumers from bad actions, we're actually opening the door for a substandard product to be offered as a green product and misleading customers. I don't think that was the previous lobbyist, the lobbyist on the previous panel. I don't think that's her intent. But when she went about drafting it, that is what she has created. And by moving this bill, that is what we are setting our constituents up for. Mr. Chairman, I conclude my testimony. NRG asked for this the committee's unfavorable vote on this bill. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Reinhardt, you're signed up unfavorable.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since my colleague took an extra 2.5 minutes, I only have 30 seconds then to respond. I will just echo the points that my colleague said, but before I do that, for the record, Richard Reinhardt from Percy Public Affairs, we represent the Maryland Retail Energy Suppliers Association. We also come in unfavorable with this legislation. I would like to point out a couple quick things out of brevity, as I know time is short with all of you today. There were a lot of questions by this committee related to the former panel, related to discussions around what this bill does, particularly the potential creation of a brand new definition of green power, Senator. So the question and concern that Senator Watson had about the consumer itself related to the disclosure language, how, if this body does not understand what potentially the green power definition means, how is our consumers going to understand that on their disclosure? More importantly, the suggested language that we have in front of us that have been presented from the House, you know, it specifically says, and I'll point out on lines 11 and 12, renewable energy credits in the amount sufficient to match the percent of green power, quote, electricity in your contract. Well, if that's going to be the disclosure language, that's going to be part of our marketing material. Out of respect to the consumer, how are they going to understand what that means? Unless we've adopted this brand new definition under the statute, the consumer is going to have to look at the new law and go, oh, that's what that means. So in itself, I think the disclaimer language is somewhat flawed and even ambiguous. I don't think it's intentionally done that, but certainly it's not going to help our consumers understand what they're doing and what they're buying. So I think echoing, as I said before, the points that my colleague have said, the suggested information that have come through the Office of People's Counsel, the Public Service Commission, and my colleague to the far left of me, we encourage this body to report this bill unfavorably. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Nash, you'll be the final witness on this one.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Katie Nash on behalf of Vistra. First, I did want to provide a brief overview of the consumer protection actions that this body and the PSC have undertaken, something that OPC is very concerned with. In 2020, the PSC created the Compliance Enforcement Unit, which is CAD, and updated its website to provide consumers more information. Also in 2020, this body passed SB 603, which was sponsored by Chair Feldman, legislation that established a training and education program at the PSC for suppliers. To our knowledge, this program has not yet been begun. In 2021, SB 31, sponsored by Senator Washington, requires suppliers to stop marketing to OHAB customers. That implementation is still at the development of at the PSC. And most recently, the PSC chairman raised concerns about complaints and announced a period of maximum enforcement. Capturing complaint data is important so enforcements can be taken. So why the history lesson? Those are consumer protection measures. This bill is a renewable portfolio standard change. When the House considered this legislation, we were asked to brainstorm some possible solutions to improve consumer education regarding the renewable portfolio standard as this bill contemplates changing. So we did our homework and we came up with some ideas. The PSC could ask that we as energy suppliers for marketing materials that we do a data request to all of us, and we provide those marketing materials of any current offered product considered green power, the new definition under this bill. They could inspect those materials for any misleading claims under the current rules and consider actions against these retail suppliers in an ongoing period of maximum enforcement. The PSC's website could be updated to allow for shoppers to sort for renewable products and location. So the shopper that we heard, she could sort and better understand where her energy is coming from. The commission could review its current regulations regarding disclosure to align with current rules. And also we could improve education efforts for suppliers and our consumer advocates so the advocates know to report these complaints to the Consumer Affairs Division. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any questions for this panel? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 1214. We're going to next go to Delegate Henson, who's patiently been sitting in the front row on House Bill 976. And I'm going to call up, you've got a sponsor panel of Colin Choney and okay, we have another sponsor panelist. It's virtual. Let's see, and we got some other favorables. Can I just bring, we have some straight up favorables. We've got Matt Hill. That's not Matt Hill. Janice Jones Oden. Okay. Let's see. Okay, well, these are okay. So let's I'm not sure if I'm missing it. We have one more virtual witness. So let's start with you all and then we'll go to the virtual witness. So Delegate Henson, we're here on 976 and you take the time you need to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. House Bill 976, Mold Assessment and Standards, is a bill that would bring some statewide standards for the inspection, detection, and remediation of mold. Indoor air quality is a huge issue. A lot of residents in Maryland, a lot of people living in nursing homes, children in schools, daycare facilities, you name it, any place that has structures that have indoor areas have issues time to time with indoor air quality, specifically as it relates to mold. This bill works in companion with some other bills that have been passed this session that will help renters in Maryland specifically. And so some of the testimony that you will hear will be from people who have dealt with indoor air quality issues relating to mold in rental housing, but it is not limited there, and the impact of the bill would not be limited there either. The mechanics of the bill would have several departments come together to create a work group. Those departments would create a work group that would then make either regulations, or you have the option through an amendment to have that work group make recommendations through a report that would give us the tools that we need as legislators to make the proper standards for indoor air quality. And those groups specifically are Maryland Department of Environment, Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development, Maryland Department of General Services, and then they would work in consultation with other professionals from the mold industry, including industrial hygienists and other remediation professionals. The standards that would be recommended by the group could then be adopted into legislation, or they could be used commercially to make sure that when people contract for a service, they get the service that they're contracting for. We know that the impact of mold exposure has been linked to upper respiratory tract symptoms, including coughing, wheezing, and the development or exacerbation of asthma. Mold risks are even higher for children, the elderly, and people with compromised immune systems. Maryland would not be the first state to have standards for indoor air quality relating to mold. 15 other states and Washington, DC have indoor air quality mold regulations. And some of those states are states with much more moist and dense climates than Maryland has, much more humidity like in Florida and Louisiana, who have already tackled this issue to keep people safe inside of their homes and other buildings. We understand that the CDC and the EPA have made some recommendations in this area, and there is also a very robust commercial industry that also could serve as a guidepost for our departments as they get together to make recommendations to us and or regulations that would finally give the state of Maryland a standard as it related to indoor air quality and mold. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Okay, thank you. Why don't we go to your two panelists? Want to grab the mic, either one of you, and then tell us who you are, and each of you has 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Janice Jones Oden. I live in Glen Burnie, Maryland. And I will try in 2 minutes to share with you all something I've grappled with for 2 years. Since April 2020, I have lived in a townhome, rented townhome that has had a mold infestation. When we moved in, of course, that was the height of COVID. We thought we were moving into a good situation. 2 months in, and we were met with the issues of mold. Black mold spores started to appear on the air ducts, started to smell staleness in the air, and also became very increasingly concerned when I started experiencing health concerns, coughing, sneezing, et cetera. But I want to just kind of pause and take a step back. When I started this process of advocating for my family, I didn't come from, the standpoint of not understanding constituent services and how to navigate. I'm the former director of constituent services for County Executive Stuart Pittman. So when I navigated this, I knew who to call and what to do. But even in knowing people, even in bringing out the health department, I was still met with an answer of, we can't solve this for you because they're currently in the code in the county. We don't have any remedies for mold. The second piece is when the health department came out. I'll never forget the response. She had her mask on, and before she could get into the foyer, she simply said, no one should live like this, because she could smell the mold, through her mask. The property management company avoided the costly remediation process. I had to pay out of pocket for the mold test, to which they found heavy amounts of active aspergillus and penicillin mold, significantly higher than that of the outside samples. There are several other families who have been impacted by this in Glen Burnie. I know folks down in Worcester County, Snow Hill, Berlin. I know lots of folks in Kettering who are also dealing with this. So this is not an isolated issue. No Marylanders should really have to deal with this process. And so I'm simply asking for a favorable report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Colin Choney, and I'm the Housing Rehabilitation Director for Green and Healthy Homes Initiative. And on behalf of our organization and our President and CEO, Ruth Ann Norton, I'm here today to offer testimony in support of House Bill 976. GHHI has a longstanding history of advocating for families and children and the importance of prevention of lead paint poisoning and addressing healthy home hazards such as mold. Across the state, GHHI provides healthy home interventions, preventing lead paint and other things in the home such as asthma. We're able to complete these projects in a safe manner because of the existing laws regulating lead paint abatement. It protects our workers and the families we serve. We all know the risk that mold poses to children with asthma and adults with COPD and other respiratory illnesses. And unfortunately, my organization has seen what unregulated work does to a home and how it negatively impacts family. This bill provides an opportunity to provide the protections to our workforce and those families that we serve. We're asking that this committee provide a favorable support of House Bill 976, and I'm available for any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the panel or the sponsor? Yes, Senator Watson.
I was just looking at some input from the Maryland Multi-Housing Association, and having in a prior life owned several rental properties. How do you police inside the house if the tenant is not properly taking care of the house? If mold or spores are growing, and it's because of the tenant's lack of attention to cleanliness?
Thank you for the question, Senator Watson. And Maryland Multi-Housing Association has been on one side or the other of several bills that I've had concerning mold, and specifically the rental property bills. I think that they were able to find some support for this bill because of the fact that it would set those standards. And I think even the housing providers are looking for guidance. They want to know what their responsibility is to the tenant. They want that to be stated clearly. And they also would like guidance on best practices for them to advise of their tenants and include in leases as well, so that everybody industry-wide is clear on where the lines are.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Okay, seeing none, we do have one virtual witness, is she in the queue? Okay, Sharice Liu. Okay, Ms. Liu, we see you. You're here, signed up favorable, and you've got 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members, for your consideration of HB 976 and for this opportunity. My name is Sharice Liu, an attorney with Santoni, Vachi, Ortega, and the Public Justice Center. Together, we make up the Renters United Maryland Coalition. We strongly urge the General Assembly to pass this necessary bill. Maryland residents go unprotected from the many hazards of mold in their homes without the aid of state and local agencies, because we lack mold inspection and remediation standards. This bill can change all that. As an attorney, I represent hundreds of tenants and their families, but without the tools for mold, for them suffering from mold exposure. I'm going to share the voice of one Maryland resident today using her words, because I had no tools to assist her and I failed her. I moved into the property in June 2020. When I first moved in, I didn't notice anything, but my family and friends would not visit because they said that the place smelled terribly. Within a few weeks, me and my 2 sons were having trouble breathing. And at some point, my sons and I contracted COVID, and it took us a long time to heal. We had to sleep sitting up with a pillow against our backs to breathe. I told my landlord about the mold on June 25th. He immediately told me to learn how to speak English and get out if I didn't like it. He would speak gibberish and yell outside for my neighbors to hear that I was an immigrant and that I can't speak English. My sons, who speak perfect English, saw and heard everything. I was so ashamed. Eventually, we started having frequent doctor visits. The mold was so bad, the air was moist and all of my clothing had mold on it, the clothes in the closet and the clothes in the drawers. I developed vaginal infections and rashes. I was so ashamed of myself. My boys could not breathe and they had rashes all over their bodies. I felt so helpless. Can I continue?
Yeah, I mean, if just be somewhat brief here at this point.
Yep.
Okay, we're under a tight timeline here. Okay.
Sure. My doctors told me to leave the property because they found mold on my private parts and my underwear. Eventually, the landlord gave me 60-day notice to evict me. I was happy with that until he started to come to my door every single day and scream things like, "I speak no English." One of my neighbors would point and laugh, and my sons would have to translate his disrespectful words to their mother. The 60 days were hell. I was scared of him. We were able to move, but we should have had some help. I was humiliated. I am testifying to help others. Please stop this from happening. Again, as members of Renters United Maryland, we strongly urge a favorable report on HB 976. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for our witness? Okay. Okay, I think that concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 976.
Thank you.
We're gonna next go, I see Senator Quarterman here. Would you come up here on Senate Bill 950? And you're the only witness,
Yes, sir.
so do your thing.
Thank you.
950.
Thank you, Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the committee. For the record, Senator Paul Quarterman, District 2, representing Washington and Frederick counties. Thank you for the opportunity to present Senate Bill 950, the Maryland Zero Emissions Electronic Vehicle Infrastructural Council membership. So this bill basically would alter the composition of this council to include a representative of both the light duty plug-in electric drive vehicle manufacturer and a representative of a heavy duty plug-in electric drive vehicle manufacturer in order to diversify and further
encompass the facets of the industry. District 2 is home to Volvo North America. Their Hagerstown Powertrain plant employs nearly 2,000 people, including over 1,400 members of UAW Local 171 and 1247, and they are the last major automotive manufacturer in our state. Volvo and Mack Truck are North American industry leaders in zero emission truck sales. In 2020, the group made a global commitment to having 100% of its product sales being fossil free by 2040, included a near-term goal of 35% of product sales by 2030. The Hagerstown plant plays a key role in this transition through the manufacturing of all modular power boxes for the Volvo VNR electric and Mack LR electric Class A trucks. So as we as a body move forward in the goal of zero emissions, it's important to have a voice from some of our industry leaders within this council to further those efforts to reach those goals. Additionally, the Department of General Services, DGS, has reached out to our office and has requested inclusion as well, given their role in the development of some of the charging infrastructure throughout our state to support the zero emissions fleet in our state. So we've had an amendment drafted for DGS as well, and we submitted to the committee. If you don't have it, we'll make sure you have it, but it should be uploaded already. As such, you'll find a letter of support from both the department as well as from Volvo. We thank you for your consideration and respectfully ask for a favorable report.
Okay, any questions for Senator Quarterman? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 950. Next up, we're going to go to our final bills are two local bills, one from Howard County Delegation, House Bill 1005, and Senator Hester will present House Bill 1005 for the Howard County Delegation. This, and we can go to the Montgomery County Delegation, Prince George's Joint Delegation by County. Senator Kagan's going to present House Bill 778, and then we'll go for the cleanup with Senator Hester after that. So Senator Kagan, you're here on House Bill 778, which is the Montgomery County Delegation and Prince George's Delegation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Speedy McGrady here. Cheryl Kagan, very proud to represent the residents of Gaithersburg and Rockville and to present a bi-county bill. The Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, MNCPPC, which is the worst acronym ever. For those who aren't aware, it's 50-50, 50% Montgomery County, 50% Prince George's County, 10 members, 5 of each. This is basically a cleanup and ethics bill, really controversial part. Rather than filing your financial disclosure on paper, you could actually file it online. It's stuff like that that's in this bill. It makes clear who can donate to whom and how it's disclosed. And it's really just an ethics cleanup bill. I'm happy to get into the weeds, but I suspect it's been a long day. It passed unanimously in the House delegation, passed unanimously in the Senate delegation, and that ends the presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, any questions for Senator Kagan? Okay, seeing them, we do have a few virtual witnesses. Are they all in the queue? Okay, we're going to start with Jameson Adcock. Jameson Adcock.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm the president.
Right,
Can you hear me?
you've got 2 minutes, Mr. Adcock. Okay, go on.
All right, I'll start my video too. Thank you for hearing from me. I am the president of the Aspen Hill Civic Association. And I'm testifying on behalf of this bill, or I'm testifying on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Aspen Hill Civic Association in favor of this bill. The board would like to thank Senator Kramer for submitting this bill and Chair Feldman and Vice Chair Kagan for supporting it. And we are pleased that the House of Delegates overwhelmingly supported it 135-0. It is a good first step, and we hope other much needed reforms will follow. Our organization has long advocated for responsible and responsive government that acts with openness, transparency, accountability, and ethics. Unfortunately, the shenanigans at the Montgomery County Planning Board, arguably the most powerful unelected body in the county, are the exact opposite of what residents expect and deserve. And the County Council has repeatedly failed to provide meaningful oversight. I won't go into the bar and how the council didn't really do much about that. I think we all know about that, and you've had a long day. I would mention, though, that the Open Meetings Act has been violated. The consent agenda has been abused, and registration of lobbyists has just not taken place as it should. And when the council fired the entire planning board, this is what really concerns me, is that they did so in a manner that does not appear consistent with Maryland state law. And they did such a poor vetting job that one of the finalists was an out-of-state resident. Another had a social media account that was littered with bizarre conspiracy theories, and that person was approved to the board. More recently, the council appointed and immediately swore in 3 new commissioners, in again, what appears to be violation of Maryland law, and in a departure from the council's own established practice. Under the law, the county executive has 30 days to either approve or disapprove of appointments, and nobody should be seated on the board until that process has taken place, or there needs to be an override vote by the council, or there needs to be a 30-day. It looks like I've run out of time. Did I get 3 minutes? I am president of the Civic Association.
No, that doesn't get you an extra minute.
Oh, I thought that we had
That's-
3 minutes.
That's a county thing,
No,
not
that's
a
a-
state thing.
We're tight here, so we're on the 2 minute, but I think we
Okay,
got
well,
the
my
gist of your,
apologies.
right.
I have
Nobody's-
written testimony, so thank you
Right.
very much for hearing from me.
If it makes you feel any better, nobody's signed up in opposition, so it's all good.
I don't want to take more of your time, so thanks.
Okay, next up, we've got Cheryl Gannon. Is Ms. Gannon here? Signed up favorable with an amendment. And then we've got one additional witness after Ms. Gannon. Ms. Gannon, you've got 2 minutes and you're signed up favorable with an amendment.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Cheryl Gannon and I live in Silver Spring, Maryland. And I want to thank Senators Kramer, Feldman, and Kagan for their work on this important legislation. I urge enactment and call for additional reforms outlined in my written statement. Notice of agenda. The opportunity for public participation requires timely notice to the public, and a strict 72-hour rule is needed. Residents are not paid lobbyists and cannot monitor the agenda continually for additions and deletions. Lobbyist registrations should be available online. Currently, residents must file a PIA to see the list of registered lobbyists. The statute should be amended to create penalties for failures to register as a lobbyist. There are very few lobbyists registered. Financial disclosure statements should be available online. Asking residents to travel to Annapolis to review statements serves only to discourage public review. This ongoing burdensome issue is a major reason why Maryland received a score of F from the Center for Public Integrity, placing Maryland in the bottom 10 states in the country on this issue. Prohibit commissioners from standing as candidates for elected offices and prohibit the full-time chair from outside employment. The possibility for conflicts is too great. Also restore the previous limit of 2 terms for the chair. An appointment of commissioners. Compliance with procedures for appointing and then seating commissioners should be overseen by the MNCPPC with clear guidelines. Earlier this month, the council seated 3 new commissioners in clear violation of section 15-103 of the land use article of the Maryland Code. One possibility is to have the trigger of swearing in new commissioners come from MNCPPC after reviewing the compliance of procedures has been followed. Thank you very much.
Okay, any question for Ms. Gannon? Okay, thank you for your testimony, which brings us to our final witness on this bill, Amanda Farber. Ms. Farber here. Ms. Farber, you've got, again, 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the committee. My name is Amanda Farber, and I'm a resident of D18. I followed the evolution of this legislation since it was first introduced. I would like to thank Senator Kramer for originally proposing reforms, and I appreciate the work that has gone into HB 778. I understand there are not likely to be additional major changes at this point, but I'd like to highlight that while this bill is a step forward, additional reforms are needed to further public trust in and transparency of MMCPPC. First, let me stress there are many excellent dedicated professional staff at Park and Planning, but the structure of the nearly 100-year-old agency and certain processes and procedures would benefit from further scrutiny and reform. You have my full expanded written testimony, so respecting your time, I'll just give you my top 3 asks, which I think are timely and straightforward. 1, the public should be able to electronically access financial disclosure statements for appointed members, as they can for members of this legislative body, and not have to drive to the State Ethics Commission in Annapolis to obtain copies. 2, MMCPPC was not in compliance with state ethics and lobbying laws until raised by citizen oversight in 2021. The commission should be required to publish their list of registered lobbyists on their website. as is the practice for Montgomery County, Prince George's County, WSSC, and the state. I asked the commission for this in 2022, but it has not happened yet. And 3, the legislature should take steps to ensure the language of the current land use article is clear as to whether or not a planning board appointment can be sworn in prior to county executive approval, disapproval, and or the 30-day window afforded to the executive to make that determination. Thank you for considering these comments, and that's time.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the witness? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 778, which brings us to our final bill. Howard County delegations can be presented by Senator Hester, House Bill 1005. And you are the only witness.
Thank you, Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, members of the committee, for your consideration of this local Howard County Bill HB 1005. Basically, this is a bill about deer population management. Our state estimates that Howard County has about 50 deer per square mile, which is a lot of deer. Ideal numbers are closer to 15 deer per square mile. And this excess deer population leads to a lot of issues, including nearly 1,000 vehicle collisions per year just in Howard County. In fact, in 2020, a report by the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety found that Howard County ranked 10th in the nation for these animal-related collisions. And so in order to address this issue, it was a very narrowly tailored bill that would amend Howard County's bow hunting regulations by reducing the safety zone from 150 yards to 50 yards for bow hunters who either hold a deer management permit, which would be like a crop damage permit on farmland under the license thereof, or are part of the county's deer population management program. And so this roughly matches the hunting regulations in our neighboring jurisdictions of Montgomery, Frederick, and Carroll County. The legislation is supported by the Howard County delegation. You should have a letter, as well as the local government, due for its potential to triple the area available for deer population management while maintaining the safety precautions. For these reasons, I request a favorable report on this local bill HB 1005.
Okay, any questions for Senator Hester on this local bill? Okay, that said, that concludes bill hearing on House Bill 1005 and completes our bill hearings for today. Okay, folks, here's what I'm going to propose. We do have a social gathering later, so I want us to have a little break, a reasonable break in between. On the other hand, we're getting down to crunch time. So I'm going to propose is let's come back here in 5 or 10 minutes